Welcome to Mythoria. Tonight's story is The Scandalous Popes of the Middle Ages, Boring History for Sleep. As the world outside grows quiet and your breath begins to slow, let us drift back in time, to an age when the papacy stood not only as a beacon of faith, but also as a throne of power. In the dim glow of candlelight, prayers rose in cathedrals, yet behind stone walls, whispers of ambition and scandal stirred. We will walk gently through centuries where silk robes and jeweled crowns masked both devotion and desire, where saints and sinners shared the same stage, and where the weight of a single voice could crown a king or divide a nation. This is not a tale of judgment, but of reflection, an echo from history told softly, like a lullaby of the past. Now let us begin. The Scandalous Popes of the Middle Ages. Boring history for sleep. The Scandalous Popes of the Middle Ages. In the hush of night, you hear how the papacy grew from spiritual roots into worldly power. Stories of saints mingle with murmurs of corruption, as the Vatican becomes both holy temple and political throne. You close your eyes, and slowly the sound of the day begins to fade. The world outside grows dim, and a softer world, a quieter world, takes its place. You breathe, slowly, evenly, and with every breath you take, the centuries fall away, like leaves drifting down from an ancient tree. Tonight, you wander to Rome. Not the Rome of today, bustling and bright, but the Rome of the Middle Ages. You walk through streets where the air carries the smell of smoke and bread, where merchants speak in hushed tones, and where pilgrims arrive with tired feet and hopeful hearts. Above all of this, towering and immovable, lies the Vatican, a palace of stone, a home of prayer, and yet also a seat of power. The Vatican, even then, was not simply a church. It was not only a place of incense and hymns. It was a throne unlike any other in the world, because it claimed to be built not on earthly soil, but on heavenly promise. The Pope was said to hold the keys to heaven itself. His words could bless, his words could condemn, his words could shape the fate of kings. And so the Vatican became a place where prayer met politics, and where the sacred mingled with the scandalous. As you walk deeper in, you can almost hear it. The echo of footsteps against marble floors, the whisper of cardinals in red robes gathered in darkened corners, the soft rustle of parchment as edicts and decrees are signed with ink that will decide the fate of entire nations. The Vatican walls, strong and silent, seem to breathe with secrets. Secrets of faith, yes, but also secrets of ambition. In those centuries, the Pope was more than a shepherd of souls. He was a ruler. He crowned emperors. He demanded tribute. He could call for wars in the name of God, and he could pardon the most terrible of sins with a single word. His reach extended across Europe, from the castles of England to the cities of Spain, from the German plains to the French courts. And as his power grew, so too did the temptation that clung to it. You pause for a moment, and you let your mind imagine what it must have felt like. To stand at the altar, draped in robes of white and gold, knowing that your words could move armies, could shift the balance of kingdoms. Would your heart tremble with the weight of it? Or would you feel the slow burn of pride, whispering that you are no longer merely a servant of God, but perhaps something more? The Vatican itself seemed to mirror this conflict. On the outside, it was holy, a place of prayer, a place of candles glowing against the dark. But inside, in its hidden chambers, there was plotting, bargaining, and endless negotiation. Like a great cathedral organ, the Vatican played many notes, some pure, some discordant, all blending into a song that was both beautiful and troubling. And so, in the stillness of night, you can feel it. The tension between heaven and earth, between humility and ambition, between faith and power. The papacy was never just one thing. It was many things at once. A beacon of hope for the poor, a pillar of strength for the faithful, and yet a magnet for those who sought wealth, influence, and control. You let that thought drift slowly through your mind, like incense rising in the air. Every institution, no matter how sacred, carries the mark of human hands, and humans are never free of weakness. Perhaps that is why the Vatican walls seem to whisper. They remind us that even holiness is shaped by the shadows around it. As your breath steadies, you sense the stories waiting to be told. Stories of popes who inspired with kindness, and popes who ruled with iron. Stories of leaders who prayed for peace, and leaders who schemed for power. Stories where the line between saint and sinner grows so thin, you can hardly see it at all. And as you rest in this moment, in this soft beginning, a gentle question rises within you. Can any soul carry both the crown and the cross without trembling? Power draped in silk and gold. You picture popes dressed in robes not of humility but of majesty, wielding crowns like kings. Their voices bless the faithful, yet their hands guide armies and treasuries, shaping empires with soft words. You breathe slowly, and with each breath, you see the image of a pope rise before your mind. He does not walk in sandals or wear simple cloth. Instead, he moves with a weight of silk, a shimmer of gold, a crown heavy with jewels resting upon his head. He is not only a shepherd of souls, he is a king among kings. In the quiet of night, you imagine the ceremony. A hall lit with candles, hundreds of flames dancing against the stone walls. Music drifts upward, slow and solemn. Cardinals bow low, princes kneel, and there, at the center, stands the Pope, lifted above the crowd. His robes are woven with threads that catch the light, each fold whispering of wealth and majesty. The Middle Ages were not gentle times. Kings fought for land, nobles schemed for influence, merchants traded for gold, and through it all, the papacy rose higher, not just as a spiritual guide, but as a figure of authority. To wear the papal crown was to wear power itself, power that touched every corner of Europe, power that could bless a nation or break it. You picture the papal tiara, a crown not of one layer, but three. Each band of gold stacked upon the other, symbolizing dominion over the church, over kings, and over the earth itself. To the faithful, it was a sign of sacred duty. But to others, it was a reminder that the Pope ruled not only hearts, but also kingdoms. His word was law, his blessing was treasure, his anger was a storm. Close your eyes and let yourself imagine the contradictions. A man called to humility, wrapped instead in robes of grandeur. A servant of God, treated like an emperor. At times the splendor was a sign of devotion, the finest fabrics, the richest metals, offered to honor the divine. But at other times it was a mask, covering ambition with the shimmer of holiness. Think of the banquets held in papal halls. Long tables heavy with food, roasted meats, ripe fruits, goblets of wine. Think of the gifts brought by kings, jewels from the east, silver from the north, spices from faraway lands, all to win the Pope's favor, all to secure his blessing. For his blessing meant armies would march, borders would shift, and crowns would be secured. And yet, as the silk flowed and the gold gleamed, the faithful sometimes wondered, was this the way of Christ? Was this the path of the fishermen from Galilee, who walked barefoot and preached beneath the open sky? The question lingered in the hearts of many, even as they bowed before the grandeur of Rome. You breathe deeper now, and you see the paradox more clearly. Power can comfort, but it can also corrupt. Beauty can inspire, but it can also blind. In the Middle Ages, the papacy was both, a beacon of light for the faithful, and a throne of ambition for the powerful. The silk and the gold shimmered under the candlelight, but behind the shimmer, shadows waited. And as you let that thought drift across your mind, you find yourself asking, If holiness wears the robes of kings, can it still remain pure? The Avignon shadows. You drift into France, where the papacy moves its seat to Avignon. Far from Rome, it feels like exile wrapped in luxury. 7 popes ruling under royal influence, raising questions of loyalty and faith. Your breath falls into a slower rhythm, and with each exhale, the scene around you shifts. The marble halls of Rome fade into the distance, and a new city rises before your eyes. You are no longer in the eternal city. You are in Avignon, a quiet corner of southern France, where the papacy has been carried away from its ancient home. It is the year 1309. The Pope has left Rome, leaving behind the basilicas, the ruins, and the restless crowds of Italy. He has come here, to the banks of the Rhone River, a place of calm but also of distance. The papacy will not return for nearly 70 years. This time is remembered as the Avignon papacy, a season of shadow, of exile, and of splendor. You walk the streets of Avignon, and you notice how different it feels. Rome carried the weight of centuries, the dust of empires, the memory of saints and martyrs. Avignon feels lighter, more provincial, more intimate. And yet, within its walls, the popes built palaces of stone, halls of luxury, fortresses of authority. The people called it a Babylonian captivity, a time when the papacy seemed chained, not by Rome's tradition, but by France's influence. Step by step, you approach the Palais des Papes, the palace of the popes. Its walls are high, its towers strong. Inside, chambers glow with tapestries, with carved wood, with the flicker of torches. It is beautiful, it is magnificent. But it is also a reminder. The papacy has left its sacred roots in Rome and now breathes under the shadow of kings. Close your eyes for a moment and picture the gatherings. Cardinals, dressed in crimson, debating in long corridors. French nobles whispering in corners, their voices carrying influence into the ears of the Pope. Decisions of faith intertwined with decisions of politics until the lines blur. The papacy, once universal, begins to feel national. Bound to France, tilted by France, swayed by the will of French monarchs. You let your breath soften, and you wonder what the pilgrims felt. They traveled from faraway lands to see the successor of St. Peter, but instead of Rome, they found Avignon. Did they feel disappointment? Did they feel betrayal? Or did they marvel at the new splendor, the sense of wealth and order that seemed to bloom in this French court? History remembers these years with unease. The Avignon popes were not all corrupt, not all greedy. Some worked for reform, for order, for peace. But the very setting, this exile from Rome, carried a sense of doubt. Could a pope far from St. Peter's tomb still claim to hold the same authority? Could a papacy wrapped in French politics still be truly universal? The Avignon years gave rise to questions that could not be easily silenced. Questions that lingered in the minds of kings, of scholars, of peasants alike. Questions about where true faith resides, in a place, in a person, or in something deeper that no crown and no city can ever contain. And as you drift in this reflection, you feel the shadows stretch. Shadows of doubt, shadows of influence, shadows that remind you that faith, when tied too closely to power, can lose its light. The Rhone River flows quietly outside the city walls. Its waters carry the whispers of pilgrims, the rumors of nobles, the prayers of priests. And you, resting here in the night, hear a question that rises above them all. When holiness is uprooted and replanted in foreign soil, does it bloom or does it wither? 2 popes, 1 Christendom. You enter a time of division when 2, even 3 men, each call themselves the true pope. The faithful are torn, cities divided as Europe wonders who truly holds the keys to heaven. Your breathing slows and you find yourself standing in a world more divided than before. The walls of Avignon still echo in your mind, but now a deeper rift has opened. A rift not of geography, but of faith itself. For there comes a time when Christendom looks up, searching for its shepherd, and sees not one pope, but two. The year is 1378. Rome has reclaimed the papacy, but the return is not peaceful. The people of Rome demand an Italian pope, and so Urban VI is chosen. Yet many cardinals, uneasy and fearful, declare his election invalid. They gather again, this time in Avignon, and elect another pope, Clement VII. And suddenly, Europe is torn in two. You imagine the confusion of the faithful. In France, Spain, and Scotland, people look to Avignon. In England, Germany, and much of Italy, they look to Rome. Priests lead prayers in one land for one pope, while in another land, prayers rise for his rival. And the question lingers in every heart: who is the true voice of God's church? Close your eyes, and you see the absurdity. Two men, each dressed in white robes, each crowned with the papal tiara, each declaring himself the successor of St. Peter, each excommunicating the other, each calling the other false, illegitimate, a danger to the faith. The unity of the church, once a solid stone, cracks into fragments. The Great Schism, as it is remembered, lasted nearly 40 years. At times there were not just two popes, but three, each with his court, his cardinals, his followers, each with kings and kingdoms behind him, using the papacy as a weapon in the endless game of politics. The Pope of Rome claimed legitimacy. The Pope of Avignon claimed purity. Later, a Pope of Pisa claimed reform, and the faithful were left in shadows, their trust pulled in different directions. You imagine being a simple villager, far from the halls of power. You walk into your small church, with candles flickering against the stone. You hear your priest pray for one pope. But then you travel to another town, and there a different pope's name is lifted. How heavy must that confusion have felt when the gate to heaven seemed guarded by rival doorkeepers. The division spread doubt, and doubt spread unrest. If the church itself could not agree on its leader, how could it guide souls toward eternity? The papacy, meant to unify, became instead a mirror of Europe's rivalries. Kings used it to strengthen their thrones, armies marched in its name, and faith itself felt fragile, trembling under the weight of politics. And yet, through this chaos, the rhythm of daily devotion continued. Monks still sang their prayers, pilgrims still walked the long roads, families still lit candles at night. The faith of the people did not vanish, but it carried a shadow, a question that would not go away. The schism finally ended with the Council of Constance in 1417. The council deposed the rival popes, elected a new one, and sought to heal the wound. But the scar remained. The memory of division lingered, and it planted seeds of doubt that centuries later would bloom into calls for reformation. As you rest in this moment, you feel the weight of those divided years. Two popes, two thrones, one Christendom split down the middle, and you ask yourself gently, when those who claim to speak for heaven cannot agree, where does your heart turn for truth? Scandal in sacred robes. Rumors swirl of nepotism, indulgences, and secret alliances. You feel the tension of priests turned into princes, where holy vows bend beneath earthly desires. You breathe slowly, and the story deepens. The white robes of the papacy shimmer under candlelight, but now you see more than silk and gold. You see stains, faint but undeniable. For in the Middle Ages, the papacy was not only a throne of prayer, it was also a stage for scandal. Close your eyes and imagine the whispers. Cardinals speaking of nepotism, popes elevating their nephews, cousins, and even illegitimate children into positions of power. Families turning the sacred college into a dynasty, the church into inheritance. The word nepotism itself comes from this very time, from the nepotes, the nephews who became princes in crimson robes. You picture indulgences being sold, the promise of forgiveness exchanged for gold coins. Pilgrims arriving with heavy hearts, carrying their sins, only to find salvation priced and catalogued. Some believed, some doubted, some despaired. The holy became entangled with the marketplace, and faith itself felt bought and sold. And then, the rumors of lavish lives. Banquets more fitting for kings than for shepherds of souls. Tables heavy with roasted meats and flowing wine. Music echoing through halls where monks once whispered prayers. The robe of the Pope was meant to symbolize humility, but at times it seemed like a costume, covering ambition with a veil of sanctity. You let your breath slow, and you sensed the unease that spread across Europe. For every humble priest tending the poor, there was a tale of a cardinal living like a prince. For every story of charity, there was a rumor of corruption. And so faith grew complicated, not lost, not broken, but shadowed by doubt. Some scandals were darker still. Alliances with kings that betrayed the trust of nations. Promises made in secret. Favors traded for land and armies. The papacy was meant to rise above earthly kingdoms, but often it seemed entangled in their struggles, like a spider caught in its own web. And yet, even in the midst of scandal, the robe still carried weight. People still knelt. Kings still sought papal blessing. The paradox remained. Flawed men in sacred robes, their weaknesses laid bare, yet their authority unshaken in the eyes of millions. Think of a candle in a dark room. Its light flickers, sometimes unsteady, sometimes dim, but still it glows. The papacy in these centuries was much the same. Its scandals were real, its shadows undeniable, but its presence still guided hearts, still offered comfort, still held a power greater than any king could wield. You pause, and you wonder, how can something be both sacred and stained? How can a robe carry both the scent of incense and the marks of earthly desire? The paradox is not easily answered. Perhaps it cannot be answered at all. History remembers these scandals with mixed voices. Some condemn the popes as corrupt and greedy. Others remind us that within the same walls lived saints, reformers, and humble servants. The truth is not one story, but many, woven together like threads of silk, some shining, some dark, all wrapped around the same robe. And as you rest in this reflection, you feel the robe itself almost whisper. A garment meant for humility, yet heavy with scandal. A symbol meant for purity, yet stained by the touch of human hands. The question lingers gently, soft as the night air around you. When the sacred becomes tangled with the scandalous, do you turn away, or do you still search for the light within the shadows? The long echo of reform. The night softens as you hear the slow steps toward reformation. Voices rise, calling for purity, for return to faith, echoes that will shape centuries yet to come. You rest in the thought that even in scandal, seeds of change take root. Your breath is steady now, slow and calm, as we come to the final chapter of this quiet journey. The scandals, the divisions, the splendor, and the shadows have all left their mark. And yet, history reminds us that even from the darkest of nights, dawn eventually rises. The papacy of the Middle Ages, with all its flaws, carried within it the seeds of change, seeds that would echo for centuries to come. You picture the faithful of those times, ordinary men and women who longed for purity, for honesty, for a church that reflected the humility of Christ. Their voices were quiet at first, whispers in chapels, murmurs among scholars. But whispers, when repeated through generations, grow louder. The cry for reform began not as rebellion, but as longing, a longing for the sacred to shine more brightly than the scandal. The Council of Constance in 1417 had already tried to mend the great schism, uniting Christendom under one pope again. But the memory of division, of corruption, of indulgences and power, remained like a scar. Councils gathered, scholars wrote, preachers spoke. Some dreamed of healing from within, others dreamed of transformation from without. The echoes of reform stirred restlessly in the silence of cathedrals. Close your eyes and imagine walking through a small monastery in those days. You hear monks chanting, their voices soft, steady, timeless. They still believed, still served, still prayed. But even within those walls, questions lingered. Should the Church return to simplicity? Should the Pope shed his gold? Should the faith be guided by Scripture more than by courts and crowns? These questions, once hidden, began to take root in open soil. The 15th century turned to the 16th, and with it came the voices of reformers who would change the world. Martin Luther, John Calvin, and many others, standing on the foundation of centuries of unease, would ignite flames that spread across Europe. But those flames were not born in a single moment. They were the long echo of centuries of doubt, centuries of scandal, centuries of whispered prayers for something purer. And yet the Catholic Church itself also changed. Councils of reform, new orders of monks and nuns, missionaries carrying faith to faraway lands. Even amid criticism, the papacy endured, adapting, reshaping, finding new ways to guide. The robe, though stained, was not abandoned. It was washed, repaired, renewed again and again by those who still believed. You breathe deeply, and you feel the paradox one last time. Power and humility, scandal and sanctity, division and unity, all bound together in the long story of the papacy. The Middle Ages did not end these tensions. They only made them visible. And from that visibility came transformation. Think of history as a great bell, hanging in the tower of time. Every event is a strike upon that bell. Some strikes are soft, some are loud, but each sends out echoes that carry across centuries. The scandals of the popes, the schism of Avignon, the grandeur and the greed. All of these were strikes. Their echoes still reach us now, reminding us of the fragile balance between human weakness and divine longing. And as the night draws close, you rest in that thought. You do not need answers now, only the comfort of knowing that history, with all its shadows, can still guide us toward light. That even in scandal, there is the possibility of reform. That even in division, there is the hope of unity. That even in doubt, there is room for faith. You breathe once more, slowly, softly, and let the question settle in your heart. When the echoes of the past reach your ears, will you hear only the scandal? Or will you also hear the call to begin again? And so, we have wandered through the shadows and the splendor of the scandalous popes of the Middle Ages. We have seen how faith and power, devotion and desire walked side by side, leaving echoes that still linger across time. History, even in its scandal, reminds us of the fragile balance within every human soul and the quiet possibility of change. As the night deepens, let these stories fade into silence, like candle flames softly flickering out. Your mind can rest now, knowing that the past has spoken and the present is stillness. Sleep gently, dream softly, and carry only peace with you.